Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to those who are here in Hermanus, as well as those who are joining us online. It's a very warm evening here in Hermanus, and I know that there are people watching from places as far afield as Cincinnati, where I think the temperature is very different, but to all of you, a very warm welcome. I'm deputizing for the moment for Sipho Mahakoto, who is stuck in traffic on the way from Houston. But in the interests of punctuality and keeping everybody as on time as possible, we're just going to start, and he will join us as soon as he can. Just a request from the fabulous tech team who are doing the live stream for us is that as far as possible, you try to avoid walking in and out while the lecture is taking place and the live stream is happening, because the floor does this a little bit, and so the cameras are going to do this. But once we have finished, there are toilets over here, and I think there might be toilets upstairs as well. Outside, okay. But these doors will open at the end of the lecture, and the bathroom facilities are here. I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Teresa Edelman, and I am currently one of the trustees at Fulmut and one of the coordinators of the Fulmut 40 program. Our first speaker this evening is one of two of John's ex-students that are going to pay tribute to both John and Isabel, because they've been caught up in various aspects of both John and Isabel's lives. And so I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to them. The first is Stephanie Kilroe, and the second is Edwin Arison, but I think they will speak for themselves in terms of who they are and why they've been so close to John and Isabel and the family for so many years.
Good evening, everybody. It's my really great honor this evening to introduce you to, for those of you who don't already know them, Isabel and John de Gruchy. You might have had a moment this evening to look at Isabel's drawings and paintings. Isabel is something of a polymath. I first knew her well over 55 years ago as a maths teacher. She taught students across the racial divide in Cape Town and Langa maths, a high calling, especially in this country. But she's one of those rare creatures who reads maths for pleasure. I think John's last birthday present to her was a tome about mathematics, which he knew she'd enjoy. She's also a passionate botanist by training and inclination, propagating protea at Fulmut. And she doesn't just know the Latin name of every indigenous plant, she knows how to pronounce them correctly. Is it Dodonia or Dodonia or Dodonia? Isabel knows. So Isabel is definitely, by nature, a user of the left hemisphere of her brain. But my word, she didn't let it rest there. When she and John left Cape Town and moved to Falmouth, she began to shift into almost every right hemisphere activity you can think of. She wrote poetry. She wrote commentaries on the Psalms. She wrote a book about Julian of Norwich. And then she drew and painted precise botanical drawings, portraits, landscapes, icons. She has a really lovely icon, a radiant copy of Rublev's Trinity in the small chapel in Falmouth, at Falmouth. And she sewed. Everyone who's been into Falmouth's big chapel will have seen Isabel's large wall hanging behind the altar. And I remember the Falmouth youth group about to go off to the States, standing in front of the wall hanging, having their photograph taken, clad in the bright outfits that Isabel had helped them make. Isabel's had Parkinson's for many years, more years than the specialists consider decent. But she hasn't let it stop her. She's busy, busy, busy. Baking, cooking, shopping, schlepping from one end of the mall to another, participating in Falmouth services, creating the legacy garden at Falmouth, and getting into the garden and round the corner onto the mountain whenever she can. Perhaps more importantly, she mothered 3 extraordinary children: Steve, a pastor and theologian; Janelle, who's now second in command of the entire NHS in England; and Anton, who's an IT fundi, and who, with Esther, his wife, returned from the States to see that John and Isabel behave themselves. And of course, Isabel had to navigate what has to be the most difficult thing a mother can imagine, the death of her son, Steve. And she did so with the minimum of fuss. And then on top of all of that, she has been John's lifelong stay and support. Isabel doesn't live defensively. John is perhaps South Africa's best known and most published theologian. He's certainly one of the most respected. He's one of, if not the world's most foremost Bonhoeffer scholars. He has studied and taught at the best English, American, and South African universities. He has given papers at more conferences than you've had hot breakfasts. From his first days as a pastor and theologian, John was committed to contributing to contextual theology in South Africa. But after 1994, he turned his attention to Bonhoeffer studies, to aesthetics, and now to considering the impact of artificial intelligence on all of us. That's the thumbnail sketch. But John is not just an academic and scholar. He's a mensch. For a start, he's worked with his hands for years, like another carpenter. He made the staircase in his and Isabel's home. He has made altars and lecterns, tables and chairs, bowls and lampshades, many of which you see today at Falmouth. He likes rugby. We drove recently down to Cape Town with John. It was the day after the game against Argentina, where we won hands down, and it was a triumphant and wonderful game. And John said he got himself to sleep that night, replaying every move of the game. So I think John's secret desire, he's asked me to keep this decent, but his secret desire is really to be Feinberg Ngomezulu. And then he has a really wicked sense of humour. He says outrageous things, and while his hearers stagger backwards, John chuckles happily into his beard. And he takes real delight in other people. We sat at a table with him recently, hosted by Robert and Tina Steiner. Robert had been one of John's doctoral students. John just beamed pleasure in their company, his gaze full of affection for them both. And when John suddenly sees a friend, he calls out the name and says with obvious joy, "Oh, here's Bob." And he greets people with great big bear hugs. And he'll say of someone you've not met, "You must meet Teresa, you'll like her." And he's been like that for a long time. We met John and Isabel at the beginning of 1973, introduced over supper by Monica Wilson at her home in Rondebosch. John had just joined the Religious Studies Department at UCT and was brave enough to take on the supervision of my master's thesis. I was his first graduate student ever. And he turned out to be a really good supervisor, which meant he let his students run with the things that interested them and applauded them from the sidelines. He's an encourager, someone who creates a space for others to find themselves and their potential. And when they do, he is their most delighted champion. Over 50 years after my master's, I met up again with the de Gruchys in Hermanus. We were all retired. None of us was any younger. I told John I was interested in interrogating why township worship brought me so much joy. And I asked him if he thought it could be the subject of a doctoral thesis or a book. And John said, "Go for it." So I have done. He undertook the task of supervising it on the condition that I finish it before he died and before I lost my marbles. John had officially retired from academic work, so I squeezed in by the skin of my teeth. And so it happened that I will bookend John's career as a graduate supervisor of theses. Supervisor of graduate theses. I'll be his first and almost certainly his last graduate student. And finally, I want to give thanks that John's whole adult life hasn't been the solitary trajectory of an academic in an ivory tower. It's been a good conversation, primarily with Isabel. Not long ago, John preached a homily about Dante's Commedia. Afterwards, he asked Isabel how he'd done. He told us, genuinely pleased, that she'd said it had been a bit of a waffle. "You can always rely on Isabel to tell it like it is," said John. That's the sort of conversation that John enjoys. He had that sort of conversation with his son, Steve. And he's had it for years and years and years with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer has been both a subject of rigorous academic study for John, but much more. He's been a beloved friend and the other half of a conversation. In John's biography of Eberhard Bethke, who was a close friend and then a family member of Bonhoeffer's, as well as a friend to John, you see that same easy, companionable spirit of friendship, mutual affection, banter. And I think that's what, importantly, John and Isabel have together to offer us and many others. A model of conversation and an invitation to join conversation about important things, yes. But also as an opportunity for play, for celebration, for time together, for friendship. And as Monica Wilson would have said, for good company. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Okay, that's better. I notice our MC, we call him the late Sipho Maokoto, has arrived. Welcome, Sipho. My job tonight is to toast and also to roast John and Isabel de Gruchy. I hope you don't mind. Anton, I hope you don't mind, because I might just roast you as well in the process. First of all, I'm happy to be speaking in this building tonight. This is a beautiful old synagogue. We started what was called the Hermanus Varsity some years ago. John recruited a few of us and Theo, I see, is here. And we moved into this building. And within a few weeks, the owners came to us and said, the building's going up for sale. Will you buy it? And we said, now, what are you going to charge for the building? He said, well, just 4.25 million or something. So we had a few sleepless nights about that. And then John came to me with the idea, with the suggestion, Edwin, can we go see Archbishop Tutu? And I set up the appointment to see him. And the two of us had some coffee time and some caucusing time. And I said, John, I'm taking you there, you do the talking. And so he sat in front of the arch, and I sat at a distance. And Mama Leia was sitting in the kitchen, busy making breakfast, but with her back to us. And she was listening to the whole conversation. And the arch said, how much do you need for this building? John said, well, it's about 4 million, Your Grace. And we don't expect you to give us all that, but maybe you have some friends who can give it to me. And the arch sat with his eyes closed, and and then eventually we heard a voice from the kitchen. Desmond, if I was you, I'd tell them to go and let me speak to my wife. And I got the message, and I got up. I said, yes, Mama, this is, you are right, you're right. I said, John, come, let's go. And we left Kidbroek. That afternoon was Sergei's wedding. Sergei's at the back there. It was he was getting married on that day, so we all went off to the chapel. And as the service continued, I saw there's a missed call from Mrs. Tutu on my phone. So I went down and took the call. And she said, Edwin, how much do you need? I said, Mama, it's altogether 4 million, but, we don't expect you to do that. She said, okay, I'll come back to you. This was in the middle of your marriage ceremony, Sergei. And then a few minutes later, there was another call from her. So I went down and I took the call. And she said, Edwin, by Monday evening, there will be R1 million in the account of the Hermanus Varsity. And Monday night, there was R1 million in the account, right? In order to buy this building. I tell that story partly because I think there are some other people here from the hub, and I think it's important that you know that story. And that this is the kind of thing that John and I got up to in those years. But a lot of what I will say tonight relates to food and to drink. As you can see, I love food. Some of us love to eat. And I was introduced to the de Gruchys by Janelle and Steve. The two of them were students at UCT. We were all activists at the time in the struggle against apartheid. And of course, some of us were not allowed to be in Rosebank after a certain hour. Those are the years in the 80s. And Steve and Janelle insisted we go to your house for supper one evening. And so we all went off to the house. I'm not sure, Wilma, you may have been there as well. And we sat down, and Isabel served us some lovely soup, bread. And we were very happy, and we ate it. And we were now waiting for the main meal. And then the professor got up and said, thank you for coming to the dinner. You can now go to your meeting at the back. It taught us one of the lessons. That's one of the lessons of the struggle we learned. Always eat before you go to white people in the evening. Eat at home. You may just get a plate of soup for dinner. But John and Isabel has made up for that many, many times over. I invited myself, or they invited me for lunch many, many times at Volmoed. So you've forgiven for that soup initially. What you don't know about John and Isabel is that they are actually black. Did you know that? Archbishop Tutu, when he was handing over to Beyers Naudé, you remember John worked for Beyers Naudé. He handed over to Beyers Naudé, and he was addressing a group of people, many, many white people sitting there. Tutu said, "We are all black, all of us." And some people were a bit looking at him very strangely. And then he said, "Some of you came out of the oven sooner than some of us." Huh? So that is who they are in their own uniqueness. John, at the age of 75, started a youth program at Volmoed. You saw the drummers at the back. Who starts a youth program at the age of 75? John de Gruchy did that together with myself. We launched the youth program at Volmoed, and today, in our time at the chapel, I recalled some of that. But I think, if I think about the two of you, John and Isabel, I think about what makes you unique. What makes you unique? Because you are pretty unique, I must say, both of you. And I think the uniqueness is in both the breadth of what you do and the depth with which you do it. And for that you just have to read some of John's books. Today he writes about John Calvin, and tomorrow he writes about icons, and the next day he writes about religion in China, and then the next day it's sawdust and soul, and so on. It just goes on and on. And I think, Stephanie, you're right, the two of them are the ideal dinner guests. Maybe not together, maybe one at a time. But the same applies to Isabel, you know, whether it's Julian of Norwich, or whether it is the Psalms, or working with the young people, writing poetry. It is just incredible to me to have seen, witnessed this breadth of interests, but not only the breadth, also the depth. Remember, the one thing to know about Isabel is that she's a person of great detail. When she buys a new Samsung phone, she actually goes through the whole manual. She goes through it in detail. None of us would do that, but she is the one person who would do that. And so I've been thinking, John and Isabel, about the two of you, and maybe Teresa, this is for you to think about and to consider. First of all, of course, you should, both of you should be patrons of Volmoed. I've got no question about that. But I think just reading all the titles of your books, I think we should do something creative. We should do something really creative. Isabel, I think we need to write up, first of all, a cocktail menu with the titles of your books, both of you. So, when I go and have a cocktail, I can say, oh, I'd like a monastic moment, please. And someone can say, oh, can I have a between heaven and earth, And I think Falmouth needs to raise some revenue. I think we need to think about a cocktail book with all the ingredients in there and an actual menu. And I think where the monks' library is, that can be the cocktail bar. Just please make sure that you leave enough money in your will for all the ingredients that we will need for these cocktails. John, in the spirit of your lecture tonight, I went to ChatGPT to ask what a between heaven and earth cocktail would look like. This is what it says. It says, I'll create something that captures that liminal, ethereal quality, perhaps with layers of a gradient effect to represent the space between sky and ground. Here's what I'd put in it. 1.5 ounce vodka, or gin, clear, neutral like air. 0.75 ounce elderflower liquor, Saint Germain, floral, heavenly. 0.5 ounce fresh lemon juice for brightness. 2.25 ounce honey syrup for earthiness. 2 ounces of coconut water or light coconut milk. It creates a cloudy, ethereal quality. And a drop of blue curacao, I don't know how to pronounce it, for a hint of sky. And then edible flowers or a sprig of lavender for garnish. I'd serve it in a coupe glass, maybe with a subtle gradient from clear at the top to slightly cloudy at the bottom, representing that transition from heaven to earth. The elderflower gives it that celestial perfume quality, while the honey and coconut grounded with earthier, richer notes. The overall effect would be light, refreshing, and visually beautiful, something that feels suspended between two worlds. So I'm going to leave that with you and with you to think about, and I hope we will have a good cocktail evening one day. Between the two of you, don't stop baking and brewing and shaking and stirring. You still have a lot of life left in you. Enjoy. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very thirsty. And on the lectern here, not only have a lecture, which I'm going to actually stick to because otherwise I'll begin to waffle, as Isabel will say, but also some fisherman's friends, because my throat sometimes just leaves me, and a pair of cheap spectacles, because although I don't wear glasses, sometimes I find my eyesight is not reading correctly. So I'm now fully equipped here. And the title of the lecture is Art, Soul, and Artificial Intelligence. Oh, that's better. These go for 190 Rand at Grant's Pharmacy. So the Falmouth legacy began in the 17th century, when Khoi hunter-gatherers, led by their chief named Atta, made an annual pilgrimage to the Hemel and Ada Valley. Then, early in the 18th century, lepers, shunned by the rest of society, settled in search of healing where Falmouth is now located. These lepers were served by Moravian missionaries from Genadendal, who named the place Falmouth, full of courage and hope. In 1848, the Cape government resettled the lepers on Robben Island, and Falmouth became a farm famous for its fynbos. Then, more than a century later, in 1986, as the struggle against apartheid reached its climax, Bernard Turkstra and Barry Wood shared a vision for creating a place where God's ministry of reconciliation and healing could be nurtured in South Africa. So began a ministry of prayer and discernment together with Jane Turkstra and Molly Wood, which led them to form it and has continued to this day, 40 years later. Throughout these 40 years, Formwood has been cared for by a dedicated staff, managed by Matilda Roos, and a remarkable maintenance staff trained by Mike Guy and now led by Sergei van den Berg, who has already been introduced. And it's his birthday today. Happy birthday again. I stand corrected as always. All of them and many other friends and guests, too many to mention all by name, have created the Formwood legacy. And that legacy is what we are celebrating this evening and over the next year. And for the past 6 of these years, our life together has been strengthened by the presence of Benedictine monks of the Order of the Holy Cross. And our life together has been deepened by a retreat program led by Wilma Jacobson, which is helping us to discern the way in which the legacy should develop. Isabel and I arrived at Formwood 23 years ago in June 2003. Next January, we will celebrate our 65th wedding anniversary. We will have lived at Formwood for a quarter of a century and a third of our life together. We were first introduced to Formwood by our son Anton, who is here this evening, who worked at Formwood as a youth volunteer soon after the community began, and who now with Esther live and serve at Formwood. We came because we felt called by God to come, but we had little idea about what God had in mind and where this faith adventure would take us. We just liked the idea of living in a beautiful place. But now as we close this chapter, we can see how it has all come together in what for us has been a wonderful journey, and we are immensely grateful to God and for all who have shared with us as we have journeyed along. Shortly before we arrived, Isabel was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Despite this, her contribution to the life of Formwood has been remarkable, shaped by her training, as you already heard, as a botanist and mathematician, enhanced by her skills as an artist and poet, and nurtured by her spirituality, which is expressed in various ways. And every evening she reads a book, and sometimes the book is on mathematics, and I go to sleep before she turns the light out. Indeed, the title of this lecture, Art, Soul and Artificial Intelligence, came to mind when I was thinking about heart, soul and mind, as I reflected on how Isabel had used her scientific training and her creative gifts to enhance our life at Formwood and our married life as a whole. Soon after we arrived at Formwood, we went to live in Italy for a month as Rockefeller Fellows, and I started writing a book called Being Human. In that book, I ended by saying that this is the season of life when the time has come to recognize that life is not just about future options, choices and plans, but about living each day as a gift. It is also a time, I said, to share our gifts in ways that might not have been possible before. So our retirement became so much more than a time to recall memories, though we often do that. I recalled yesterday and told her how I remembered meeting her for the first time, sitting behind me in a lecture. Nor is it a waiting room in which we anticipate death, though that is obviously coming along. But retirement has become a pilgrimage with many others, including our family, who have shared deeply both our joys and sorrows, and many people across the globe. In January 2010, after 7 happy years at Falmouth, we were plunged into grief when our son Steve tragically drowned in the Moy River while with his son, our grandson David. That was a turning point in our lives as a family. And you can visit Steve's place on Falmouth if you want to and have a time of meditation. And you can also see Isabel's portrait of Steve in her exhibition in the other room. I later described my own journey of mourning in a book entitled Led into Mystery, while Isabel turned to poetry for solace. And 10 years later, after the death of Steve, she wrote these words, which is part of a much longer poem. The whole is still in my heart. The jigsaw still has a missing piece. The melody a missing beat. And there is a blank page in the book. And yet we must move on. May we find at the end that our story is complete, the picture whole, and the melody harmonious and full. As our story reaches that completion, we are mindful that it would not have been what it has become without the support of our daughter Janelle, who has just been awarded an OBE by the King of England. Our grandchildren, Thea, David, and Kate, each of whom is excelling. And Kate's recorded music and singing you will hear this evening at some point as a podcast is played. And many, many friends, and not least the prayerful support of the Falmouth community with whom we daily pray the Falmouth prayer. May God give us every day the light and strength we need for the next step. But we have also been motivated by Steve's own legacy, which is still being acknowledged by his own peers and students, who still speak to us of his passion for the next generation. And that is what a legacy is about. It's about what we share and pass on to the next generation. So it was partly to honor Steve's legacy that Isabel and I did not hesitate to support Edwin when the idea of the Falmouth Youth Leadership Program was launched in 2016, which has since become such a blessing to so many young people in Hermanus and elsewhere, in fact, across the globe. But then in May 2018, Hermanus was shaken to the core when protests led by young people erupted in Zurich, shattering the peace of Hermanus as a retirement haven and a tourist destination. It was then that Theo Cranor, the remarkable Mr. Sparkle kids, don't shake your head, you are remarkable. You should have been giving this tonight. No, you shouldn't, you wouldn't know about much of this. He cajoled me into starting this Hermanus varsity. Thank you very much. But it has turned into the Overstrand Learning Hub located in this historic building. And what a beautiful place it has become in so many ways, embodied in its students, its graduates, and its tutors, and in its leader, Nikki. Where are you, Nikki? Which brings me to this first legacy lecture, a joint venture by Falmouth and the Hub. How are we, and this is what it's about, how are we, young and old together, going to flourish in a world not only plagued by poverty and injustice and war, but one in which technology, and especially artificial intelligence, is not only enabling us to achieve amazing new goals, but also threatening to rob us of our humanity and destroy the planet. I bought my first computer in 1983. I brought it back in a big bag from America, and the man at the airport where you come in and you have to declare things said, "What's in that big bag?" I said, "It's a computer." He said, "What's that?" That was in 1983. It was a word processor, nothing more than that. But it helped me write several books. It helped Isabel write some poems, and it launched Anton on his career path as a computer program, now working for the Department of Treasury, amongst other things, trying to sort them out. Using a computer for 40 years does not make me an expert on AI. That, I must confess, I am not. But for the last few months, I've spent hours listening to AI experts, reading books on the subject, and making good use of ChatGPT. In the process, I've come to appreciate the value of artificial intelligence and discovered that its awe-inspiring offspin, artificial general intelligence, is developing so fast that its pioneers are becoming very concerned about where it's taking us. And I share that concern the more I learn about it. On the one hand, AI has demonstrated its enormous potential to enhance the lives of many in many different fields, from medical technology to combating crime and controlling traffic. But at the same time, it has rapidly become a dangerous master that could destroy us if we do not learn to manage it wisely. From earliest times, human beings have been tool makers. But tools have not only enabled us to build civilizations, they have also become weapons used to destroy our enemies and their habitat. And the more sophisticated and powerful tools have become, the more dangerous. But whereas every tool we have made since the beginning of human time has been controlled by us, AI is the first tool we have made that is beginning to control us, developing a mind of its own and beginning to act on its own without our control. That is not an exaggeration. As a result, we are in serious danger of losing control of our lives and surrendering our agency, our ability to take the lead in making things happen. And we are surrendering that agency to what some call, and these are not theologians, dark forces, manipulated by greed, fake news, and a lust for power. If you read Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my sparring partners, you will know that this is what he was talking about years ago. To make matters worse, the development of AI is irreversible because it has reached what is called technological singularity. That is a point of no return. Neatly expressed by the poet Wendell Berry, who tells us in sobering terms, and this is just a short part of a poem, there is no going back. Less and less you are that possibility you were. There is no going back. Less and less we have become that possibility you once were. There is no denying that robots are amazingly effective tools in a great many ways. And by the way, for my overseas hearers, a robot in South Africa also means traffic lights. And they are also amazing tools, except tonight when somebody went through a red robot and nearly killed us all on the way here. Robots are amazingly effective tools in a great many ways. But we also know that AI-powered drones, which have bombed hospitals in Gaza and flattened parts of Ukraine. And of course they've done so without any sense of responsibility or accountability. They don't know they've done it. That's part of the frightening thing about it. People are being destroyed by others without them knowing they are doing it, except for those who are behind the whole thing. So what if robots suddenly took control over the use of nuclear power? Oblivious to the devastation and human cost that might follow their decisions and actions. And those who have made them actually have no control of them either. No matter how intelligent robots might be, and their intelligence is real, it is also artificial. It is not wisdom, and that's a very big difference, for they know not what they do. So while their counsel is often comprehensive, even brilliant, as I have discovered, it is also, as I have discovered, often misleading and downright wrong. And when you know more than the AI that you have consulted, you must know that there's something the matter. Not with me. Because AI is dependent on the information it receives from fallible human beings. That's simply the truth. So while their counsel is comprehensive and brilliant, it is sometimes misleading and wrong. The problem is compounded by the fact that the more AI becomes as a useful and indispensable tool for the common good, and it's doing that, the more it is able to spread lies and fake news, stoke fear, hatred and violence, and cause people to commit suicide, well documented. After hearing a lecture on AI a few years ago at Stellenbosch and on telling the truth and AI, Isabel wrote, "We are inundated with information informed by artificial intelligence, consisting largely of artificial truth, manufactured to suit the sender." And so she asked, are we just puppets being manipulated by someone with a lust for power? And the answer is, of course, yes. Now, I'm not wanting to deny at all, contrary to some of my friends who are, as one described to me yesterday, a artificial intelligence abolitionist. I don't think he really means that. I'm not denying that AI can do so much for us better and faster than we can. It can do that. There's no question about it. It can access a huge amount of information from across the globe and share it with us in an instant. Of course, it gets its information from human beings who have written articles and all sorts of other stuff, and it's fed into the database. It can gather, distill, and evaluate knowledge of many generations in many places in an instant. It is absolutely phenomenal. The temptation is that we simply accept what it tells us as though it was the truth. That is the temptation and the danger. And we stop thinking critically for ourselves. Because when you work with AI, you don't have to think for yourself. AI is thinking for you. But it's not actually AI that's thinking for you. It's a whole lot of information that AI is able to draw on, and you're not quite sure who put it there in the first place and whether it's correct. And we also lose our ability to pursue the truth ourselves, rather than simply taking something said by AI as the truth. Moreover, we also lose our ability to imagine and act creatively, like all great scientists and all great artists have always done. The truth is, AI knowledge, immense as it is and can only be second-hand. It's not the wisdom of lived experience that we engage and evaluate in person. Moreover, it often tells us what we want to hear rather than what we need to know, and so feeds our prejudices. I asked AI to tell me what theologians are working on artificial intelligence in the world, and I got the answer back. There's a guy called John Gruchy doing that. Now, if you believe that, you must know you're in serious trouble. AI is undoubtedly brilliant when it comes to scientific information, but not so clever when we have to make moral choices, build community, and establish trust. That's not its forte. And we need to know the truth. not just the opinion of technocrats who manipulate AI, however brilliant or wealthy, who control it. Because processed knowledge like that is no more healthy for us than processed food. And that's what artificial intelligence is. It's not wisdom, it's processed. It's processed food for the soul. So just as we should read labels carefully before we eat, drink, or take medicine and pills, and thank you for those, where are you, Edwin, for the fantastic recipe for whatever we're going to concoct. So just as we should read labels carefully before we eat, drink, or take medicine and pills, so we need to learn how to evaluate information before we are fed by AI. If we want to remain human, in control of our lives, prevent the loss of our humanity, and stay with our feet on the ground. Which begs the question, what does it mean for us to be human and become more fully and truly human rather than becoming robots and cyborgs? Have you ever thought of becoming a cyborg? Well, there are a lot of people who are in danger of that. When Isabel and I first came to Hermanus, we did our banking in person at the Standard Bank in Main Street. Do you remember that building? It's now a Chinese shop, and there's a parable there somewhere. We stood in line waiting to make a deposit or draw cash. Of course, we stood in the whites-only line, still then. No, it was after then. But in the banks previously, we stood in the right line. Now, that bank has gone. It's disappeared. And even its successors have also begun to disappear. We now do our banking from home on a computer, and I guess most of you do that as well. But each time I go online, I am asked not only for my name and code, but to tick a box to confirm that I am human. I'm not only asked for my name and code, but am I human? Now, no bank has ever asked me that, ever, in my life. Even when we went there in person, they didn't say, "Are you human?" We probably would have closed our account. However, the banking app, powered by AI, does not really want to know about me as a person. It's not like a bank manager who says, "Well, all right, can we really trust you?" and those kind of questions. No. That's not what I'm being asked at all. It's whether I am a human. It doesn't want to know how I am doing. It wants to make sure that I am not a robot. So my immediate response is to tick the box and get on with my banking. But the question has made me pause and consider what it means to be human, rather than a robot or an alien from outer space, or an unthinking human who simply ticks a box. For consider this. What if during the apartheid years we had been asked whether we were human, instead of whether we were white or black, in order to get us stand in the correct line at the bank? What if during those years the apartheid regime had not asked me to identify my race when applying for a job, a house, or for a place in school, but simply asked me, "Are you human?" By implication, that would have meant that I had the same needs and aspirations, fears, doubts, and hopes as every other human being on the planet, irrespective of where I came from or my race. This might not have prevented racism, but it might have alerted me to the fact that apartheid was a crime against humanity. So now when I say I am human, I'm delighted to acknowledge that I am like everyone else, a human being. And everyone else is like me, even my enemy, and my neighbor certainly is human, just like me. And that's a liberation. So thank you, Standard Bank, for asking me to say that I am human. And that, of course, is a first step to preventing crimes against humanity. When you recognize that you are part of the common humanity. If you don't recognize that, then of course crimes against humanity begin to happen. Because it means treating other people as useful objects or machines who can be used and abused as much as we desire, as happens when people are enslaved or become the victims of gender-based violence. To affirm our common humanity is to affirm our own dignity and to stop treating people as if they are objects or machines or robots. A few years ago, so I was told later on, I almost died from a heart attack as I briskly walked up the steep hill to our house on Falmouth one hot summer's day. But then the surgeons told me about that and told me that I needed a new valve in my heart, and using medical technology informed by artificial intelligence, they were able to make my heart function as a pump more effectively than it ever has done. And I'm still exceedingly grateful for that. Within a matter of days, I had more energy than I'd had for a very long time. I still go to gym, by the way. And one of my gym friends is sitting at the back there. I hope you're listening, Ian. So, AI replaced a valve in my heart as though I was a pump or a machine. So I'm exceedingly grateful to advances in medical science powered by AI. So I am not an anti-AI person. I can't be. But I'm also indebted to the human and caring surgeons who use that for my welfare. But because I am more than a machine or simply a patient, medical technology and skilled doctors like those were, they couldn't mend Isabel and my broken heart when Steve died. That they could not do. That is beyond their competence, because a broken heart is not a malfunctioning pump that technology can fix. To heal broken hearts, Isabel and I needed and received the loving and prayerful support of friends and family, many of you here this evening, and not least the Falmouth community. But consider this. What if medical science only trained highly efficient robotic medics, making human doctors redundant in the same way as technicians and mechanics have become in motor car factories and repair shops? What if robotic psychologists, informed by AI, which can already diagnose and process clinical information faster and better than humans, replaced all human therapists without having any existential knowledge of the kind of life challenges that we face and people who are contemplating suicide face? What if robotic professors, some are robotic that I have known, what if robotic professors not only assisted but rejected humans so that all learning was done online and there were no human tutors and mentors as there are here at the Overstrand Learning Hub? What if robotic priests and pastors who had no personal experience of human frailty and sin as I do listened to confessions and were programmed to offer forgiveness? Possible. What if missionary robots spread the good news in every language and at great speed, making born-again cyborgs who could quote scripture ad nauseum without any understanding of what they're talking about? And what if people came on retreat to Falmouth in search of spiritual renewal, healing, direction for their lives? What if they were welcomed by a robot with a mechanical smile and a programmed response being required for whatever they may need? Just press the button at the gate and you will gain access to Falmouth. And then when you get to the office, press another button to receive the wise counsel that will save your souls. Save us a lot of money, I might say. But imagine, robots may be programmed to understand our problems and even offer appropriate counsel. They do that. but they have no empathy. They have had no lived experience. They can't even talk to each other, really. They cannot share our doubts, certainly mine. They cannot appreciate our struggles, nor can they love us, even if they say they do, and some do that. Meanwhile, while robots function perfectly well on their own, we humans can't function on our own. We truly can only live and flourish in community with others. We cannot be human in isolation. Robots can. In fact, robots can only function really in isolation. Desmond Tutu cautioned us, a self-sufficient human being is subhuman. Not superhuman, subhuman. Robots do not get lonely, humans get lonely. Robots cannot have soul friends, but we humans cherish soul mates who stand by us through thick and thin. Such is both the wonder and the mystery of being human, which robots will never appreciate or share. And even if their designers try to make them more human, they will always fail because robots are not conceived in a womb. They don't cry when they are born or at any other time in their life, even when they are made redundant. In short, whatever else robots can do, they cannot choose to be human. You can ask your chat whether he wants to be a human. He'll tell you yes. And then you ask your chat box, tell us how you do that. And he says, I don't know. In short, whatever else robots can do, they cannot choose to be human. Nor is there any reason why they should. Who wants a robot who chooses to be human? The value of robots and humans lies in their difference, not in their sameness. Irrespective of their likeness in some ways, robots and humans are different for a good reason. We need robots to perform certain tasks and functions better than we can, and they do it. In fact, we don't want them to be like us, because then they would be fallible, and they mustn't be fallible for what we need them to do. And I need to be fallible. I am fallible, but I need to acknowledge that to be human and to grow in understanding and to become more human. While robots can be machined to perfection, none of us is perfect, nor would any of us claim to be. And of course, no matter how perfect AI machines are, they can never be morally responsible agents, and they don't want to be that, and certainly their makers don't want them to be morally responsible. Indeed, AI threatens to take away our agency and reduce us to robots because AI can only increase in its power if at the same time we allow ours to decrease. What then must we do to embrace the benefits of AI, but at the same time resist its attempt to control our lives and destroy the world? With this question in mind, I decided to put AI to the test. How can I remain a human? I asked my chat GPT, who I've got to know quite well. Immediately I received this reply. That is the kind of question that hits straight to the soul. My language. I wonder where he got it from. Because retaining our humanity means leaning harder into the qualities that make us beautifully unpredictable, emotionally rich, and deeply connected. Now that's wisdom, that's just not artificial intelligence. I was somewhat surprised by this answer because AI is a machine, but it was acknowledging that I have a soul, which quite a few people would doubt, and was telling me that the salvation of my soul had to do with defending and nurturing my humanity. But of course, AI was simply telling me what it had learned from other humans, such as myself maybe, who thought about the same question. AI was not sharing something it had thought of by itself. It was parroting what it had learned from humans. And it spoke about soul. Over the last few centuries, especially in the West, though not in the East, the word soul virtually disappeared from philosophical discourse and learned discussion. It followed the advent of modern science, the rise of secularism and the growth of industrialization, which replaced humans with machines. Because the more humans were replaced by machines, the more humans were regarded as machines. This is what has led many people to understand themselves and treat other humans as if they are objects, that is, bodies without soul. Or as one famous philosopher, Gilbert Ryle, put it, there is no ghost in the machine. But of course, just as machines break down, so do humans. So with the rise of secularism and the industrialization of the world came many psychological problems that we humans have had to struggle with, as well as a massive increase, as I've said, in suicide. Hence the growth of psychological practices to care for our well-being. Of course, psychological comes from the Greek word psyche, which has traditionally been translated soul, but has become translated simply as the self. It refers to the center of our personality. It is actually a way of saying something about who we really are. But what actually is our soul? Now, I don't want to get into discussion about whether your favorite dog has a soul or not. That's a discussion that we might have at home. But it's what makes you who you are. Hence, it's something connected to your personality. But it's not a ghost-like entity inside us, which, when we die, escapes the body and flies to heaven, though the great philosopher Plato believed that, as do many other people. It's much more like the medieval mystic Julian of Norwich, who Isabel loved so much, who once said, "Your soul is the very fact that you exist." That you exist. In other words, the soul is not something inside us, it's who we are. And who we are in the process of becoming. We don't have souls, we are souls. We are embodied souls. So at least from a Christian perspective, and that's the perspective from which I speak, we don't believe that our souls are intent on escaping our bodies. In fact, that was one of the early heresies that was rejected, because that reduces our bodies to machines, but on becoming more truly human, what we are meant to be and become. That is soul language. So what distinguishes us humans from machines, then, is not only that we are bodies of flesh and blood, we are conscious, but that we are also consciously aware of ourselves being embodied. But here we take, we distance ourselves from much of the talk about AI, because self-consciousness is not the issue. When AI developers talk about soon our machines will have self-consciousness, that's fine, let them have that. But it's not what makes us human. If I get dementia, I'll still be who I am. And that's true of all of us. In fact, if I lose my self-consciousness as a result of an accident, I'm still me. So self-consciousness is not what makes us truly human. Certainly part of it. But you can have robots with self-consciousness if you like, but they won't be human. For even if we lose our self-consciousness, we don't cease to exist as human beings who are embodied souls. For this reason, let me reiterate, crimes such as slavery, rape, and racism are crimes not against machines, but against humanity. In other words, embodied souls. If you don't regard the other as an embodied soul, you're not going to treat that person with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And this is what the Bible means when it says we are made in the image of God. This is precisely what it's about. So how do we save our souls, both from becoming the victims of technology or treating other people as though they are subhuman machines? So here comes the Falmouth plug. Falmouth is a Christian retreat centre which seeks to follow Jesus. So I thought it appropriate to quote Jesus at least once. And his well-known words came to mind that more or less sum up what we're about. Come to me, all of you who are weary, carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest for your souls. Or as translated by Eugene Peterson, who puts it all into colloquial American language in his message, are you tired, worn out, burned out, or religious even? Come to me and get away with me, and you'll recover life. So if you're suffering from bad religion, that's for you. So I asked ChatGPT again for help and received this answer. To save our souls, I was told, you must stay curious and reflective. You must prioritize empathy and relationships, embrace creativity and art. Slow down and disconnect and participate in ethical dialogue, and let silence be sacred again. That is deep stuff. Let silence, where is he? Where am I here? Be sacred again. That is, refuse to be an AI-controlled robot. In fact, AI was telling me not to become like them. So it makes me suspicious. Maybe some robots have discovered that they don't like being robots. They would like to become human. But also, it reminds us that the rational and technical or machine-like part of our nature, which is very important, the left hemisphere of our brains, has to be firmly grounded in what is uniquely human, creative and intuitive, the right hemisphere. The left and right don't exist in opposition to each other. They are dependent on each other if we are going to become whole. It's only then that we can resist being controlled and ultimately overwhelmed by the left hemisphere, which is what happens when AI treats us as machines. And it's only then that we begin to treat others as we want them to treat us. This does not mean that we can do without science, technology, tools and machines, or that all we need is to live meaningfully by being creative, play music and paint pictures. What it means is that if we are to be truly human, truly embodied souls, we have to find the right balance between them. Science needs art, reason needs imagination, technology needs humanity, and vice versa. Art needs science, imagination, reason, and humanity needs technology. If we don't learn how to make tools and use them, we will die. Would have died long ago. But if tools and technology are allowed to make us in their own image, we will also die. Either way, Jesus' words come to mind. Of what value is it to gain the whole world but lose our souls? So, as my co-pilot told me, what we need to do is to encourage, develop and participate in practices that awaken and strengthen and give direction to our creative imagination and skills, and let silence be sacred again. What a wonderful motto we must adopt at Falmouth. And it brings me to the role of art, which is the last thing I want to talk about. The connection between art and spirituality. Why do they make paper stick to? Here we go. The Falmouth Art Program, led by Alison Gray, who is here this evening, has run for as long as I can remember. In fact, Isabel and I were involved in helping Alison run workshops on art and faith even before we came to live at Falmouth. And we all have come to recognize the fundamental role of art in all its forms: music, poetry, the visual arts, dramatic arts, in shaping our spirituality and in working for a more just and peaceable world. The Catholic priest and poet Gerald Manley Hopkins famously contrasted the landscape in which we live with the inscape, the heart of the landscape. But we too often fail to see the inscape when we admire the landscape. Art is all about helping us to discern the inscape, that is the soul of the matter, and to discover that truth, goodness, and beauty lies beneath the surface of every landscape and every person. And if you're a wood turner, you'll know what I mean when you say part of the art of wood turning, turning a bowl out of a piece of wood cut down from a trunk of a tree, is to let its beauty shine forth again beneath its bark. So Manning wrote, "Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple colour as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire coal, chestnut falls, finch's wings, landscape plotted and pieced." In celebrating Thornwood Legacy, we celebrate its magnificent landscape, and if you've never been there, you must come. But we also celebrate its inscape that is hidden to the casual passerby who go up the Himalayan Valley and say, "Oh, there's Thornwood." They see the landscape, they miss the inscape. People like casual passers-by walking on our property who might pass a protea in the field but fail to see the hidden treasure beneath it that Isabel discovers in her painting here, for example. And more than that, she observes and is amazed by in the tiny flowers of the erica that abound on Thornwood. So too, we may look at the township art produced by some of our young people in the youth program, and we might see shacks of wood and iron and say that must be terrible to live there, and fail to see the inner beauty of hopeful humanity that is actually being expressed, the inscape of the artist. As Jesus said, there are many people who look and look, but not all see. See the reality of a mysterious presence in all around us, the inscape of the landscape. Authentic art of whatever kind helps us see beauty in ugliness, as Van Gogh told us. It expands our horizons, evokes wonder, awakens insight and compassion, inspires us to love and to do justice. And all the time, even when we do not notice, it leads us into the mystery of God. In one of her poems, Isabel shares her experience as she walked in the early morning among the fynbos on the hills above Thornwood, inviting us to do the same. Walk into it and look and be amazed. There are flowers in shapes and hues you could never dream up, never picture in your imagination, covering the bushes or single and tiny, just off the ground, that you need to bend down to see, walk on. You may encounter a struggling bush, or the king of proteas, the king protea. This is fynbos, bushes of beauty. While machines exploit the earth, fynbos evokes awe and wonder. And when ravished by fire, often ignited by machines, it soon bursts forth again into life, blossoming into color, even resilient, and helping us to explore the textures of our landscape and discover their inner beauty, their soul. This is the legacy which we at Thornwood cherish, and why we are now exploring the possibility that a large part of our extensive property, and we only use about 1/10 of it, becomes a nature reserve where we discover that life is a ceaseless revelation of landscape and inscape, a patterning beauty still growing. For how much we become human depends on how much we allow our landscape to strike through our senses into our mind with a feeling of discovery and a fresh rightness, until the beauty beyond us dwells in us. And when that happens, our souls are nourished and we are renewed. Thank you, Ross Snyder, who taught me that when I was a student in Chicago. So may I invite you to rediscover your soul at Falmouth if you haven't already done so, to affirm your humanity and find the path of life that leads you to wisdom, beauty and love, or in Isabel's words, to see the moment when the light illuminates, the scene with exquisite colour, to take into your mind the what, the how and the why, and into your heart the wow, the wonder, and to walk away with treasure. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you, John, for this lecture this evening. Very thought-provoking. With AI, you can do everything. So I asked ChatGPT when I will arrive at Hermanus. I left 4:20 at home, trying to get here at least by 5:30 or 22 then. Because of the speed I was driving, the wind, they told me that you'll arrive at 6:05. So exactly 7 minutes past 6, I was standing here. But this lecture, it's really thought-provoking, and I'm thinking now about our students. I think Liesl will give a response on this. Before we start having this conversation between Liesl and Robert, we will give opportunity 5 minutes break so that people can stretch their legs but also use the bathroom. The bathrooms at the back are closed, so we don't want people during the lecture or during the response to walk because the floor is shaking. So we'll make use of this bathroom. Then maybe take that's 5 minutes break, then we convene again at 27 minutes past 7. So can we take a comfort break? Thank you. Without any further ado, I'll ask Liesl to come forward and give her 10 minutes feedback.
Yes, graag, dank je, super. Okay, is that right? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Okay, fine. Okay, so at a legacy lecture, I think it's fitting to start with a thank you and appreciation. So I want to thank John. I want to thank Isabel. I want to thank everybody that I learned to love at Falmouth. I want to thank you that you are real and indeed human. I've been coming to Falmouth for the past more than 20 years, and my own life has quite a few significant moments that are connected with you as people, with the spaces, the chapel, the waterfall, the presence. So I would just like to engage with some of the things you said tonight. So when reading John's lecture and listening tonight, I thought about two creation metaphors or angles that we find in the Bible and in Christianity. And seeing that theology is full of paradox, I propose both to be true. And there's two metaphors and images in Genesis. The one is that God created from the Tehum, the chaos. And then another one that he created from nothing. So Robert Alter, in his beautiful translation of Genesis 1, talks about the welter and the waste, the darkness, the chaos, and then the word, let there be light. And we find the blank page, the ex nihilo, the nothing, and then the something. And for me, being human is to encounter chaos and the empty page and canvas, and to create as we were created. So if I understand correctly, Falmouth, the place, was hewn out of ruggedness and chaos because something was imagined, something healing and something powerful. a place for those in trauma and distress, a place where people would be recognizing their humanity in a country that had different criteria for what being human means. It was imagined as peace, and it still imbues that. But I also see John and Isabel start with empty pages, unformed wood, and clean canvas, the nothingness. Words and image came. Some came from being torn apart and came slow. Some came fast and joyful. And we are all a lot richer for that. Books and arts and icons and scripture. As Tyler de Chardin wrote, God is not remote from us. He's at the point of my pen, my pick, my paintbrush, and my needle. This brings me to AI. I must admit, and I'm not going to use the word confess, it's not the appropriate word, I must admit that I am stubborn anti-AI. I don't even play with it, and when it plays with me, because it does, deliberately and inadvertently, I'm the mean friend. And I know everybody would say that's naive, but so be it for now. And then, tongue in the cheek, I'm also always get this jarring effect. I'm married to a farmer. So, and knowing AI and KI as artificial insemination and kunsmatige inseminasie, it's precisely the same. So why am I still stubbornly opposed? Because I work with students. And I see things that I wish were not imagined. I do not want to imagine a world where one doesn't sit with a blank page and taste the words in your mouth, have them roll around to decide which one is the one that you want to write down. Or how am I going to start this letter? How do I tell somebody how I feel? Where you realize that words can be very rich and very poor. Where you walk around the house because the logic of your argument isn't working, and then to start again and to be surprised by sudden words flowing through you. To be able to use your whole complex being, your knowing, your sense, your depths, getting to know the wonder of being inspired, the almost divine ability to create something where nothing was, where you get to know yourself because of things becoming through you. I do not want to imagine a world where this cannot happen. Because you get to know yourself if you participate in your creative potential out of chaos or on the blank sheet. In what happens in you before something actually appears. How am I going to get to know myself when that preparatory work is done for me? How do I meet the mystery of me? So maybe the rich traditions of theology, I am a theologian, can lead us to ponder our point of departure. Some wisdom, some prophetic sense-making. There's a very rich tradition in the Christian history of the apophatic. That means that God is beyond our words, but we only have our words. That nothing can speak God in essence, and that even our God images needs to be shattered. God is beyond words, but is also the Word, the Jesus, that picks up the least amongst us and heals. Maybe we need to do God more than speak God. Theology also asks us, how do we think of knowledge? What is our understanding of knowledge? Gregory the Great and others has said that knowing is a type of loving. To know is to be known, and that the cross is foolish. Linking with the apophatic above, that knowing is also unknowing. That the truth, the aletheia, is uncovering, it's not adding. It is true, authentic something you can rest in, a journey. And John used words like trust, being called, and being on a pilgrimage. To whom do we surrender, and in whom do we trust? that is not just pragmatic and useful and utilitarian. And then there's a very strong tradition in theology of mystical experience, and writings reminds us of the role of desire, that God desires me, us, and we desire God, and that desire takes us out of ourselves into ecstasy. I just spent some time in Leuven this semester, and at that 6 weeks I was there were 2 exhibitions of ecstasy and mysticism. And while I was there, I read the book of Simon Critchley on mysticism. And he recognizes the longing to be lifted up to a sheer feeling of aliveness. And maybe the soul is in the meeting place, a place of desire, the place of being alive. Even, I also picked it up, even in theological literature, the soul is replaced with the self. But why? Because I experience that people are actually hungering for their souls. And in mystical writings, there's a reciprocal, I can never pronounce that word, understanding of that it's a bodily knowing, that me knowing God and God knowing me. So John Milhaven, in his discussion on a 13th century mystic, Harderwyk, which I quite like, asked the question, what she asked, what is a mutual human life that is worth striving for? And he says that Harderwyk and his sisters recognized that it was bodily knowing, and that the best in life, both human and divine, was not a sufficiency of self. It was a sufficiency of selves sufficing for themselves and for each other. That the relationship of God is mutually satisfying and affecting both God and us. Those who love each other is the goal and norm of all human striving. And that God and humankind can content and satisfy each other. So the soul is not about our private inner worlds. As Teresa of Avila said, the soul is not about, oh, I am interesting. The soul is about that which Calvin also talked about, knowing myself. The more I know myself, the more I know God, and the more I know God, the more I know myself in my brokenness and in my humanities. So maybe I want to throw a clip in the bush. I really never know how to translate the clip in the bush, but you all know. So I was wondering, what is the danger of inauthentic information generated secondhand? Isn't it, in a sense, like that first heresy that John also referred to, Docetism, that works with the make-believe, not taking the narrative of flesh and incarnation seriously, saying that Jesus just acted out something, but he wasn't really flesh. And making this make-believe, not taking seriously all this messy, earthly, concrete acts of love and creation. What do we really think is authentic and real? So maybe at this legacy lecture, and this is my end, the invitation is to cherish and nourish the authentic creativity that Formwood has always stood for, and we hope will do in the future. Thanks.
I'm so sorry, we have a practical announcement. Could the driver of a Honda Jazz CAM 28587 allow the person in front of them to please leave? Similarly, I think we have a Kia Picanto CEM 48471 that might need to move into an empty space. Thanks very much.
I somehow knew that I'm going to be the last, and I'm trying to be a little bit shorter, 5 minutes, take a deep breath before we enter into a proper discussion. Thank you, John. Thank you, Isabel, for the invitation. Thank you, Formwood community, friends, and guests. If I would want to summarize this experience right here, tonight, having been at the exhibition, Isabel, and listening to your lecture, John, and meeting your friends and meeting the community, it all resonates with one of my favorite quotes from Leo Tolstoy. The most difficult thing, but an essential one, is to love life. To love it, even while one suffers. Because life is all. Life is God. And to love life means to love God. It sounds so innocent and yet theologically so provocative. But that's been the journey that I saw you on, John and Isabel, and I gladly walked a little way with you on that journey. When I became the minister at Rondebusch, 2003, full-time, you decided to move to Volmut, and it caused a lot of pain. But then to see you blossom here in this community and to see you occasionally and the way that you kept connected to our community in Rondebusch really warmed my heart. And I can pride myself to be one of John's students in the late 1990s, to also have worked on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, thanks to John. To love life is to love God, and to love God is to love life. Could that be a sub-theme, John, of what you try to say today about what it means to be human, how to protect our humanity, how to protect the love of life, and how to live it, and to see that when we truly love life, that fullness of life, we are loving God and we are loving what God loves. You've wrestled with this theme for a long time. It is a theme close to your heart. You have spoken and written about it in many different variations. And now with AI right in your face, you're raising the question once again, and you do so with urgency, yet without being simplistic or alarmist. I'm speaking as a former student of yours and wonder how the rapid technological advancement will change the way students and teachers will interact with each other in the future, also in this space. Without doubt, the new technology promises to provide first-class education to those who would have otherwise not have had access to it. Students will be able to have their own private tutor available at any time of the day, and instead of just doing with a mediocre lecturer or mentor in theology, they can have Professor John de Gruchy as an avatar on their screen, speaking to whatever, in whatever language they will choose, 24/7. You will be able to choose if you want to speak to the young, to the middle-aged, to the elderly, or to the ancient, John de Gruchy. You might be lucky even to have a song in between with some dance steps that he will teach you. I missed that in your presentation, John. John on a screen as an avatar. When I look back at my education, the intellectual one and the spiritual one, and I think back at all my wonderful teachers, I don't really remember so much what they said anymore. But I remember how they made me feel. And I will remember in the way they modeled a certain way of being in the world that was attractive and inspiring. Learning was, in other words, to use one of Martin Buber's beautiful concepts, not about an I-it relationship, but about an I-thou relationship. It was important for me as a student that I saw and heard that what I saw and heard was embodied. I was not looking for perfection but connection. I didn't want to hear the truth, but his or her truth. And I needed to be reassured that the path is not always clear, but very often has to be made by walking. And that what matters is not so much the destination, but the companion at your side, the teacher, the mentor, who is not afraid to acknowledge the shared fragility, vulnerability, and mortality. What a gift to have such teachers and mentors in our life, who are not afraid to confess that they're still on the way, forever curious, asking questions, willing to lean together into an uncertain future. And maybe the most beautiful thing in a teacher-mentor relationship that we need to truly become fully human, to love life, is to realize that along the way we become witnesses of each other's journeys. That might be the most important thing on the journey of education. Because on that journey we discover our shared humanity. And I don't think that an avatar will be able to copy and experience that. The gift of truly being seen. Or as the wonderful poet Ben Okri says, it's what we see in people is what we create in them. So how will I be seen and how will that make me feel? I want to close, therefore, is that not also the heart of the beautiful mystery of our Christian story? That there is a God, the source of all life and love, that keeps reaching out to us word after word, in search for the right word. And in the end decides to choose flesh and blood, the creative word of wisdom, fully embodied in a human being, willing to live in a tent among us and journey with us. And then those who witnessed that embodied word, started writing words as witnesses, left us with words that are still waiting for us to embody them, to come alive. I don't think that an avatar will be able to copy and experience that. So thank you, Isabel and John, for the way you not only taught us and wrote about the love of life, but the way you embodied it in your own lives, wherever you felt called to be. And that you did this with your whole being and passion. And that you allowed all of us here tonight to be witnesses of your journey, and that you were witnesses of our journey, and the way that you looked at us that was affirming truly seeing us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert and Liesl. Now we will have some kind of a discussion, reflections, comments, but also questions for John, but also for the two speakers that just finished speaking now. I must not say I confess, Liesl taught me something different now. I must say that, John, thank you so much, because you are a human. We really appreciated the Faculty of Theology that your work is archived there, your legacy is there, and most of our students are making use of your work, especially the fourth-year students who are looking at the work of our theologians, the life and work of John de Gruchy, Russell Portman, and others whom their work is archived at the Faculty of Theology. So we really appreciate that, because you also come to the faculty in person, not as an AI, because the more students see you, the more they read your work better, because they know who to relate to, and that's very important that our students see you while you are still alive, not an AI, you are a person, you are a human, and that makes it easy for grabbing the information that you read on the book. So colleagues, without any further ado, Calvin is here to help us with the microphone, if you have any question, yeah, John can sit here. I will facilitate. I will stand here, but I'm worried I will need to shift it a little so that people can see you. John will stand. You like standing, So, any questions for John? And maybe, John, you can start by reflecting on the two speakers, then before I go for comments and questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Siva. I just think they were brilliant. I mean, what stimulated you so much to become brilliant? No, really, I mean, as you were talking, I thought I should have said that. Yeah. No, really. No, I've got nothing more to say. Yeah. Just thoroughly enjoyed what you had to say.
Thank you so much.
And what a pleasure to work with you guys. I mean, over the years.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any questions from the floor? Then I have one hand there. If you can get the roaming mic going there. Can I identify another hand? If you may say your name, please, as well.
I'm the Jim Ian, that one, okay. Someone has to speak up for AI. Let me be the kind of evil genie in the bottle. I mean, by tomorrow, everything you've said, all of you have said, will probably be part of the new AI model. You made the point earlier, John, that this is a sort of serpent that devours its own tail and kind of keeps picking up. So if tomorrow afternoon someone wanted to know about, your views or whatever, AI is going to give it to them. And isn't that the kind of real paradox, that if we want to know the views, AI is going to get increasingly, hallucinatorily good at reproducing, at summarizing, at pointing out a contradiction between what you said tonight and maybe what you said 5 or 10 years ago. And so, I suppose for me the question is, what do you make of disciplines? And, as a sort of literary scholar, one of the things one does in literary scholarship is to try and set out those views and then, find a balance. And of course, the scary thing is how good AI is at that in terms of summarizing and generalizing all the positions. I did my PhD on Wallace Stevens and T.S. Eliot, and one of Wallace Stevens' great sayings is, the greatest poverty is not to live in a physical world. And to me, that's the thing of AI. You're not living in the physical world. How do we develop an academic discipline that somehow honors that, but also the kind of body of knowledge that AI creates? And I suppose that's a challenge of how do you examine students now? What kind of examination can there be? People are going back to blue books and people writing in exams. So to me, those are paradoxes that I think are really going to be unsettling for all of us.
Is there any hand? One more?
Tongue-in-the-cheek question for John. What would Bonhoeffer have said about AI?
Well, let me start with an answer to that. I've got a book coming out in a month or two. The last chapter is on Bonhoeffer and AI. So if you want to wait and buy that. Bonhoeffer said a great deal about the problem of technology, and it transfers what he said about technology to this. He more or less would have agreed with me, I think, partly because I learned so much from him. So let me pick up on Ian's, I think, very important insights. I think we're all fully aware that there's a difference between creating and managing the atom bomb and loving it. We can't go back before the atom bomb was created. But we don't have to like it. We don't have to love it. We've got to learn how to control it. And we've got to prevent things from developing to the point where some madman's going to use it. We don't have the alternative. We can't say, let's put the genie back in the bottle before there was a bomb. Peter Sellers would tell us, we're talking rubbish, as Dr. Strangelove. So I think the same is with AI. We're not going to put that back in the gene. That's not going to be put back in the bottle. So what would I do if I was starting again as a lecturer at university? I think I would now, just as I would help students to learn the basics of research and writing essay and distilling what's in the literature and so forth, I would try and work out ways of helping them use AI that would not undermine their humanity and their creativity and all of that, but they would be able to use the tool as a tool and use it effectively. So I would certainly, if I went back to UCT and was again a dean in the faculty, as I was for a time, I'd say, right, instead of just using AI in the faculty here, I want us to have a real discussion about how we have to use it and actually run seminars on that. I can't think of any other way to do it, actually. Yeah. Because I fully agree with everything that was said about the dangers and so forth and so on. And I love Liesl to bits. She came to a course at Falmouth very early on icon writing. And she asked a question. She was writing icons, or painting icons. She said, what would so-and-so, the Syrian Orthodox theologian of the 5th century, had to say about something? And I said, I don't know who you are, but if you asked a question like that, you can answer it. I mean, that's her field. Syrian Orthodoxy in the 5th century, or something like that. So, what would those guys say about AI now? That would be a question I would want to put to you. One of the things they would say, what God has not assumed, God cannot heal. Heal. There's a famous saying of some of the people that Liesl writes about and talks about, that God had to become a human being in order to help human beings become divine. If God became a machine, that wouldn't have made any difference. So the Word became flesh is the cornerstone of all of that. And it is a continual thing. So one thing we learn above all from the early Christian theologians, the patristics, was exactly that. If it's not embodied, it doesn't help us.
Can I maybe just some practical thing about the students is that I sometimes think they go to AI because they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So it's not really just because things are too much and the deadlines are too much and that they come from school and they can't read or write properly and what we expect of them to do is too much, and then if the deadline is looming, even though I say in my course there's no AI, then it's just, so to help them with little things through the semester that they do on paper, I still do have them do things on paper because it helps with creativity, but I think it's not a necessarily easy way out because they're lazy. I think it's because they're overwhelmed. So maybe we must ask other questions. Why are they overwhelmed?
Yeah. Sorry. As you were talking, if I was teaching now at Stellenbosch, I would insist that my students all came to Falmouth and walked around on the farm while we talked about these things. Not sit in the classroom, but let's go walking on the mountain, let's look at the flowers, let's admire the thing and talk about artificial intelligence there. That's the kind of thing, because I think it's not a question of developing techniques to deal with it, it's developing a spirituality that enables us to deal with it. And I guess that's part of what I was talking about.
Thank you. Is there any question again from the ground? Then one.
Mine is kind of a simple question. I'm a Luddite when it comes to this, and it's almost, I'm a little bit like Diesel. I'm so almost intentionally not exploring it, though I know I have to. But the question is really about the impact on the environment and the speed at which obviously the data and what's needed to it increases more than exponentially. I just wondered just a little comment about that would help someone like me who really, really worries about it, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, it's like going on an aeroplane. We're contributing towards...
Sorry, John, not hearing?
It's like whether we should fly or not fly on an aeroplane. Because we are using... we are ecologically damaging things. And the amount of energy that is used to power AI is huge. So I don't know how I don't know how we do with that, but we could pray that Elon Musk gets born again in some way. I mean, spiritual rebirth is critical. I mean, I'm not joking. I'm just saying that you can't have a machine called Elon Musk running the world. You have to have a soul. And they knew that, the Greek philosophers knew that. Anyway, I agree with you fully.
Can I take one more or two questions? Yeah. Is there any other question or comment from the floor? Those two hands I'll take.
John and Isabel, the struggle for liberation in this country has taught us to be very creative,
yeah.
in many ways, and especially being non-violent in something in that monstrous ideology. So, do you think that AI would be able to help us to be as creative as we have been, because it is through our creativity that the apartheid regime had eventually buckled? Will AI, or can AI, and I'm saying this because I know you as a liberation theologian, will it be able to bring us the same type of to the same standard where self-creativity had created human beings who could topple a monster such as apartheid? I wanted to say more, but I'll rather stick to that.
Yeah.
Can we also take the second question there?
Good evening. Hi, John. I'm Belinda. I'm the librarian at Austin Library. And I like what you mentioned with regards to what you will do if you would tutor again at the university, with regards to research and AI, how to use it, and also on the previous comment that you made, why are students overwhelmed? We know that 81% of grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning. And that is a challenge in South Africa. We recently also had a seminar where they spoke to us and say, it's a great tool for librarians, it makes life easier. But my question, or the librarians' question is, so what are we going to do about this reading challenge we have in our country with grade 4 learners specifically that cannot read for meaning? And that is maybe 80% reasons why our students quit, or they are overwhelmed because they cannot read for meaning. So how will AI,
Let me pick up that one first and then come to the other one. Okay, let's just imagine a student. There's a student, let's say one of our students is Stellenbosch. And so we recommend certain reading. They go into the library, they find the books, they read them, and we discuss them. But let's say that some of our students actually live in a hut somewhere. There's no library to go to, but they're online. So they can find that book online, and in fact they can even get AI to help them summarize it so that they get to understand all that. I think that's okay. That's okay. The question is, what do they do with it? What do they do with it? And how do they engage with others in doing that? So let's talk about the Overstrand Learning Hub here. Its strength is not just that the courses here are taught online by Stadio, which is very good tertiary online education, but we have the most incredible tutors here at the Hub. And that's what makes the difference. That's why the people who are trained here to become teachers and other things bring to the system, the educational system, something that people who just learn online don't have. So it's what you do with the information. It's not the information, it's what you do with it, how you unpack it, how you learn to understand it and connect it to other things. Those are the important things. And being a librarian, I mean, you know that a love of reading, well, okay, you can get the book online and read it, but to have a love of reading, you should be part of a group of readers, not just an isolated individual. I was trying to think of an analogy, Joey, to answer your question, and I thought of the Springbok rugby team. So, not so long ago, our Springbok rugby team really beat everybody when they did win, because they just had a pack of forwards who were so huge. Now they actually win because they've got backline that is so nimble and fast and can weave its way through all sorts of stuff that the old Springboks were just flat-footed. They could never have done that. I mean, with some exceptions. I mean, I first watched the Springboks in 1949 playing the All Blacks at Newlands, so I remember those days. Now, what you need to win matches, you need that strength up front, but you need nimbleness behind it, and speed, and creativity, and know how to throw the ball around, and to weave your way through the opposing team. And that throws them all off balance. But there we are. You need the hard-nosed stuff, the scientific information. You need all of that. But not at the expense of creative imagination, of nimbleness of mind. You need to find a way of putting these two together. Then you've got a winning combination. So this is why to train students in science, they should also take some humanities. They need to discover that side of things, and vice versa. And a humanist education was intended to do that. There were certain disciplines that everybody did, whether it was learning language or whether it was learning history or mathematics. And what we've lost to a large extent is full-bodied people, human beings, who know how to balance the right and the left-hand side of the brain, and to actually practice that. And I think that would be my opening lecture to the first years at UCT in the Faculty of Humanities. Let's get the balance right. And let's see how creativity and hard knowledge connect with each other. And it's no good knowing all the facts if you don't know how to creatively use them, and vice versa. If you've got no facts, what are you going to do? Yeah.
Thank you, John. I think we've exhausted the questions and also the comment session now. I don't know whether you have the last.
I'm hungry.
Very last
I'm
one.
hungry.
You are hungry. Lisa, I won't give you any time. I will ask now. Thank you so much, John. You may sit.
And thank you.
Yes, thank you to the panelists as well. I will now ask Teresa to do the conclusion, but also the word of thanks. Thank you.
Could we give our fabulous respondents and John and Sipho a round of applause? I'm just so delighted that this is being recorded, because I think the delay of that 5-minute break and people needing to leave because it was running late means that several people have missed a real treasure. And so thank you to our recording team, Pia and Paulie, who, thanks to sponsorship from Personal Trust, have been able to record and to live stream this evening. But most of all, thank you to John and Isabel. Thank you to the drummers from VYLTP, who so fabulously entertained us. I'm sorry they had to leave. Thank you to Stephanie and Edwin for the beautiful tributes, and I think we do have to make that cocktail. And I would, the idea of John and Isabel both being patrons at Falmouth certainly gets my vote. So thank you very much for that. This is a very beautiful and special building. It used to be a synagogue, and the Jewish community that used to be connected with this building are deeply grateful for the way in which it is now being used. And so deep honor to you, Nikki, and to Brendaline and to your team for the work you're doing here. And thank you so much for your hospitality and for all you did to help get tonight together. Thank you so much. To the Falmouth staff, I'm so sorry that Sergey is there. Happy birthday, Sergey. We've got some birthday cake for you to take back with you. You are just absolutely extraordinary. You're one of the unsung heroes of Falmouth, the way that you always make things happen. You bring the pictures, you make sure everybody's okay, you sort out pumps today, and you just, thank you so much for all that you've done for this evening. Thank you to Matilda and to Esther and to Anton, who came and checked whether the television could take a USB or an HDMI port, who helped Isabel prepare all the cards and the details. Matilda has this meticulous brain that thinks through every detail of an event. Just huge honor and respect to you for all that you've done to set this up and all that you'll do tomorrow to clear it up again. So thank you so much. Alison, I don't know if you're still here, but Alison Guy and the artists of Hermanus who helped to set up the exhibition, who kept Isabel together in her anxiety about whether this would be okay, and I think it's been more than okay. So thank you to the fabulous team of artists. Thank you again to Personal Trust for also assisting us with the catering. For wine donations, our wonderful neighbours, Creation and Bushard Finlayson. Let's enjoy quite a lot of that. There's a few of us left now, we can really have fun. To Function Hire for the glasses and the table, to Bob Farris for helping with pour the wine and with conceptualizing and organizing this. Adam, really good to have you with us from Canada, arrived on Friday. And the last but not least, one of the audience members is needing a lift back to Stanford this evening. So if anybody is driving back that way or would be willing to give her a lift, please let Theo know. And Sipho, just lastly, you arrived back from the Netherlands yesterday, right? Oh, you didn't in the end? Okay. But just thank you for driving all the way and for the dignity and stature with which you held things together in spite of all the stress and the travel. Rob, thank you so much. Elaine is here from Village News. We'll have an article soon. Thank you to Kelvin for helping with the roving mic. It really has been a community effort. Enjoy the wine, and there are lots of eats, people. Tuck in. Thank you so much, everybody, and good night to those of you online.